I got my handy dandy notepad, the hat's back to normal, and it is time to talk about some self-published books. Hello, and welcome to my channel. Of course, this is my channel. You're watching a channel on YouTube. You're on YouTube, I'm assuming, unless you're somehow streaming this in VR. I don't know if that would work. You pirate it and download it for some odd reason. You're watching it on the road as you drive when you don't do that. Don't watch this while you're driving. That's bad. I'm Pete, by the way. You probably know that. It's in the title. Today, we are going to be talking about self-published books. We're going to be, as I said in the intro, specifically, we're talking about books that are involved with SPFBO 9, Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off. If you need to know what that is or how the rules work, there are plenty of videos out there on YouTube. I do believe my good friend Bookborn does have one on her channel. What are we going to talk about in relation to SPFBO for me? So, for those of you that don't know, most of you probably do, especially if you're watching this video, I am actually on Bookborn's team of sub-judges. There's not a formal name for them. Bookborn is assigned 30 books as one of the judges every year for SPFBO that she's participating, and she kind of subcontracts them out to 5 of us. Yes, 5 of us. And we are assigned 6 books and pick one of them to be a semifinalist so she can read them all and read less than 30. And really, it's just a fun time for us because we get to read more self-published books that we might not have read that kind of just get pushed on us. Yeah, we're a good crowd. So, it is time to update you guys on where I'm at with my batch, what books I'm reading for the rest of SPFBO 9, and whatnot. I'm going to start out talking about what books I'm planning on reading for the rest of the SPFBO 9, or what's been on my, radar, and then I'll talk about the books that I have read, including my, the ones that were assigned to me for my batch, and and then we might talk about a finalist. Maybe. Who knows? I'm not going to keep you I'm going to keep you in suspense. I apologize. Soon, probably, I believe I have it planned for October with some friends, I will be reading Phased by Victoria Tekken. So this is written by my good friend Tori at Tori Talks, and I have had other friends that have read it and really enjoyed it. This is werewolves. This is about teenage werewolves that are this is their first entrance into human society in like a normal high school place. It's not, the age of the characters might make it seem YA, but like I'm of the I can't say opinion because I don't have an opinion because I haven't read it yet, but based on what I've heard from people that have read it, it tackles some very deep mental issues that may or may that aren't necessarily YA in nature. So this is teenage werewolves and trauma. I have been told that I will want to give Tori a hug after this, and that's fine. If there is pain, that's awesome in terms of books making me feel feelings, I guess. Anyways, I'm excited for this October. The rest of these I really don't have a solid plan for when outside of Phased, so it'll probably be based on like when I'm like, I'm in the mood for this and I'm gonna go grab it off of wherever. So right now the 3 that I really have on my radar outside of maybe the finalists when they come out are Heliotrope, which is a Thickums fantasy one that I've heard some good things about from some of my friends. Wickwire Watch is, I know it's a detective story and I have some friends that have like binged through it. And then Hills of Heather and Bone, which is about bone magic. So there's some interesting stuff there, and some of the characters sound interesting, that one. So those 3 books, I did not write down their authors, and I apologize, I should have. But those 3 are kind of what's on my radar currently outside of Phased. I do not have a solid date for when I'm gonna read them, though, sadly. Next up, let's talk about the books that I have read so far, starting off with Deathless Beast. I was reading this one before it came out on SPFBO 9, and I have recently read Bone Shroud as well, which is the second book in this series. And I also have an interview with the author, Andrew Meredith, and I did that with my buddy Anitha, and we had a lot of fun on that interview. We talked about Deathless Beast, we talked about Bone Shroud, we talked about The Future, and a bunch of stuff with those books. I'm super excited for some of the stuff that he's coming out with, whether it's short stories, whether it's other series, whether it's this series. I really enjoyed this book. I will say that it takes some time to get, it feels like it takes some time to get going because it's massive. It's a really in-depth world. Like he takes some inspiration from history, which is really interesting. And then of course it's just really interesting to see every just all the stuff in this world and how it's seeded in with the story and all that jazz. He most good half of the main characters, as well as a bunch of other things in the world, is focused on these orders of paladins and paladames, which that word is a thing that he actually uses, and it's great. But in this world, there's a lot of different orders of these paladins and these holy orders, and gods are able to walk the earth, and the exploration of faith in regards to, okay, you can have faith, but you also have these gods that are walking the world. How those intertwine is really interesting, and then how different people react in opposition to that, as well as an interesting storyline. So far, only 2 of the 8 planned for this series are out. Really looking forward to the 3rd one coming out this month, actually. Honestly, this one I just really enjoyed for the world building and then how the characters really, their stories are impacted by a lot of the history and stuff that is happening, and how they're just making their way in the world. Yeah, good books. Next up, we're going to talk about the Fear of Moncrom. Moncrom. This is by Brian Astor. As you can see, this is most definitely a vampire book. It is heavy with political intrigue, vampire political intrigue, as well as just like, trying to maintain your cover when you're pretending to be a vampire as a magical person who has all the powers of a vampire. Basically, these vampires have been infiltrated by a dude, and he has to maintain his cover, and he's also the last of his order that all died trying to kill all the vampires, or this vampire court specifically. Interesting magic system, how they kind of weave in, like, this is why vampires are the way they are, this is why other magic things are the way they are. I think my biggest complaint about this book, of course, was that it was too short. I wanted more from the political intrigue. I wanted more from this world. No word yet on whether or not like the author is going to like write in this specific corner of the world with the vampires in it. But I believe he has mentioned that he's going to write more in the world, which is good. Really, really like this. Really short, bingeable read. And next, we have Daughter of the Beast by E.C. Graves. So this one was not part of my batch, but it was part of Bookborn's whole crowd, and this is one of the ones that caught my eye. Unfortunately, Dominish got it, but Dominish also loved it, which is great. More people reading this is awesome because it is one of those things that like really epitomizes one of the reasons why I like self-published, because self-published is where people take bigger risks with their stories, right? And I say this because there's these stories that aren't necessarily as, I don't feel as mainstream because it would be a lot harder to get these stories published because of the ideas. I don't know if that makes sense. To me, mainstream tends to play it safe, right? Mainstream, just publishing really likes to be like, hey, we know you follow this trend, so we're going to publish you. And that's what I see a lot of. Sometimes they'll pick up, already successful self-published books, but that's because they're taking a known quantity. Be like, all right, you're already selling a bunch of books? Well, we want you to sell a bunch of books for us and give you this publishing deal. This is a super interesting story because, one, it's about Slavic fantasy, which I know actually has been a bit of a trend. I think the really interesting thing about this is for all appearances, there is no human at all in this book. None. Zero. No humans. They're all either dog people, which I know there's a name for them. I don't remember what it was. And it's like it's a name that's in D&D too that it's bad that I don't remember it, but it's fine. There's hobgoblins, there's kikimori, which are these like brownies, the fairy things. Anyways, our main character is a kikimori. She is vaguely furred, I think, and she has large ears. I actually don't remember if she has fur all over her, but no, she doesn't. that's a thing. I don't remember, but she has really large ears. And then her village is slaughtered by this tribe of dog people, and she is taken in by them. Kidnapped is actually the more accurate term, and then she is raised by them. And it's not only just about her, but it's also about her tribe is adapting, because this hobgoblin empire is gradually approaching on their land, and there's other political things that are happening that are encroaching on their land. So it's about this tribe's adaptation to the new world, the new way of being, right? This adaptation towards this basically imperialism, like straight up imperialism that's coming after them. So it just felt like a breath of fresh air as concepts, as things go. And I think more people should read it. I'm excited to read the next few books because there's 2 more. Yeah, definitely go take a look at this. Let's talk about my batch of books. Let's talk about the 6 that I was assigned. First up, let's tackle Living Waters by Dan Fitzgerald. So this is about essentially 2 nobles, 2 children. I would call them around college age because of the analogy they're going to use. It kind of felt like these 2 nobles were taking a gap year and going out to find themselves. And this is something that is a tradition baked into their culture. And their gap year trip was a river cruise, right? They get down, they help build the raft. They're living on a raft for a good portion of this book. And they're just going up the river and trying to experience life, I guess. And then, of course, the magical nature of the river kind of sucks them in. And, the world's really interesting in this way. I think the magical nature of the river was really, really interesting. Unfortunately, though, I feel like the book, as short as it was, only really took off after the first half, because the first half of the book kind of felt like the characters were in their heads too much, right? A lot of the POVs were just them talking to themselves, either observing events that were happening or whatever. But the first half of the book just felt very passive to me, because the characters were kind of waxing about their issues and not doing as much interacting and working on, Anyways, that was kind of it was okay about the book. But the second half really picked up, was really enjoyable. I just really liked all the world building and stuff, and the world that they kind of dove into, and how the characters reacted to that, interacted with that. Once again, this last half was really, really good. Next up, we got The Bastards of Liberty, which is a fantasy in a kind of a Revolutionary War setting. It takes place in roughly, New England-ish area, all the way down to like Pennsylvania. Because yes, fantasy Pittsburgh exists. You got your British Empire, you got your Revolutionary War rebels, you got dwarves that live underground and won't let anybody talk to them unless they're above ground because it's fantasy Pittsburgh. You got this crazy, crazy expansive world. You can tell this author, who is Matthew Zorch, by the way, really, really put a lot of work into this world because he tells you about it a lot. This world was great, and it was really interesting seeing all the different places like Fantasy Pittsburgh, and hey, that's Cleveland, and New York, and all this other jazz. And oh, is that Ben Franklin, but a woman? That was cool, but I felt like the world building and telling the audience about the world building took a front seat and kind of put the story and the characters in the back seat a little bit. Most of this is in the first half. There's a little bit more that kind of happens in the back half again, but there was just a lot of it, which I love me some world building, but I also like connecting the characters as well. Number three, yes. Revenge of Bridget Cleary by Matilda Zeller. This is loosely based off of the actual murder of Bridget O'Cleary, which happened many, many moons ago in Ireland. And by many moons, I mean over a century ago. It was a horrible murder. You can read more about that in the book if you want to. But it is about her daughter. Supposed daughter, I don't think she actually had a daughter, but this daughter is a fairy. Half, whole, who knows? And I really enjoyed this book. There's definitely a found family element to this, where our protagonist is acquiring a group of friends around her throughout the story, which is really heartwarming. There was a romance that felt YA, but that kind of clashed a little bit with a lot of the concepts and traumas that are discussed in this book that are graphic and horrible, and survivor's guilt after you think you killed your mother or you played a part in her murder, which is emotionally heavy, heavier than I would expect for my experience with a YA book. I like this one a lot with the fairy lore. It's definitely, you know, based in Irish mythology, which is really cool. Yeah, definitely pick this one up if you like found family, you know, mythology, lore, fairy tales. Yeah, it kind of almost hinges on the Fae Court as well, and just the deal that Bridget Cleary has to fulfill, which is, you know, really cool. Got some really creepy fairy hunters too. Yeah, really creepy. Number 4, Delusions and Dragons by S.C. Gowland. I'll be straight up with this one. This one didn't hit for me at all. I didn't really connect with the characters, and thus the jokes made by the characters didn't land as well for me. This is definitely very sassy. I think he's like Jumanji meets Romancing the Stone, I think is the comparison. I actually haven't seen Romancing the Stone, which is probably a crime to some people. When it comes down to it, you have a husband and wife that whose marriage isn't doing too hot, are thrown into a fantasy world. And I really feel like this book spent way too much time on emphasizing their problems, such that the resolution of the book was not able to hit for me, if that makes any sense. If you like books with a lot of pop culture references, you will like this one. For the most part, it's pretty light once you get past the beginning part where they lament the marriage. The 5th one, number 5, Exiles of Zanzibar, or Exile of Zanzibar. This was the thickest book that I had, the longest one, and probably the heaviest in terms of complexity as well. Because there's this author really likes to do a lot with subtext and symbolism throughout all of this book. We have Claire is one of our main protagonists, and she has a time machine. She comes from the super advanced civilization of Zanzibar, and she is dropped in the middle of a war, quite literally, because of something happening with her machine, and it's not super focused on this machine. Definitely plays with the science is magic a little bit with the time machine in regards to what's going on there. But also plays around with a lot of themes, whether it's themes of leadership, what it takes to be a good leader, a good king, what the price of peace, I guess you could call it. No, actually more the price we pay for war is a better way of putting it. I think it kind of reminds me of Malazan in the way that there's just a lot simmering under the surface, which you can reach down and grab, or you cannot reach down and grab. It's up to you. There's a lot of political scheming in this one as well, which I really liked. Other things about this book, it does use real world place names in a fantasy setting, which is kind of unfortunate because it makes the book a little bit more confusing. There's definitely one review out there that literally says, hey, this takes place in Bronze Age Italy, and it definitely doesn't. So, yeah. There's also no map, which I think would have cleared things up. The other thing is that he uses kind of some interesting terminology sometimes. He'll use actual Latin words or other words to describe something that is not what that actual word means in our world. So Google will kind of get a gist of something for you. There's a specific Assassin's implement that I can't remember the name of, that the name of the instrument is I think it's either the Latin or the Greek word for a kiss. And it's something with a really long blade that kind of shoots out, and which is, cool. Your best option with understanding these words is actually to not look them up, but actually just look at them from context. I mean, you could look them up and that might help sometimes, but there actually are times where it was kind of confusing. It was interesting. But yeah, I thought I definitely enjoyed myself with this one. definitely a thinker of a book with some dramatic characters. Yeah, I really like the themes in this one. And finally, the last one, Stray Dogs by Freya Faust. Now, unfortunately, this one was DNF'd by me this time. This was my one DNF, even though that's not... Is it a trend? It's only been 2 years, and I've DNF'd one each year. So this one is an urban fantasy about two brothers who are on the run secret agents from miscellaneous government agency, magical government agency. And it just wasn't for me. Like, it wasn't something that I was clicking with. I'm saying, like, urban fantasy is really hard for me to click with as it is. So I'm very particular about it, and it just wasn't hitting for me. I know there are two very sassy twin brothers. Outside of that, like, I didn't really get that far in. So definitely check this book out and see if it might fit your tastes. With that being said, let's talk about the thing that you've been waiting for, which is, who's going to be the finalist? No, semifinalist. That's what I was going to say. Not the finalist, the semifinalist. I need to make sure I don't put that in the notes. Did I say finalist at any point in this video? Or did I say semifinalist like I meant to? I definitely meant semifinalist. I apologize if anybody else thought otherwise. So my semifinalist that I'll be giving to Bookborn to read is Exile of Zanzibar by Daniel Maidman. Congratulations. I am looking forward to see if she ends up picking your book. Thank you so much for everybody that, submitted their books to SPFBO. I think SPFBO is an amazing opportunity for self-published, and I'm so just glad to be a part of this. If you have read these books and you really like them or whatever, just let me know down in the comments. Are you going to be reading any of these books? Let me know. Again, thank you, everybody, and I hope everybody has a great night and just get some rest, because that is super important.